Hello and welcome back, my fellow Lovecraftians. We had a short upload last time, so we're going for a bit of a longer short story, so to say. This one is referred to as Old Bugs, once again by H.P. Lovecraft. This is an exemptive sob story by Marcus Flawless per Conscience of Gal. Let's dive right in. Shichan Pool Room, which adorns one of the lesser alleys in the heart of Chicago's Stockyard District. It's not a nice place. Its air freighted with thousands of odors, such as Coleridge may have found at Cologne, too seldom known, the purifying rays of the sun, but fights for space with the acid fumes of unnumbered cheap cigars and cigarettes, which dangle from the coarse lips of unnumbered human animals that haunt the place day and night. But the popularity of Chinon remains unimpaired, and for this there is a reason obvious to anyone who will take their trouble to analyze the mixed stench prevailing there. Over and above the fumes and sickening closeness rises an aroma once familiar throughout the land, but now happily banished to the back streets of life by the addicted of a benevolent government. The aroma of a strong, wicked whiskey, a precious kind of forbidden fruit indeed, in the year of grace, 1950. Shazan is acknowledged at the center of Chicago's subterranean traffic in liquor and narcotics, and as such has a certain dignity which extends even to the unkept attaches of the place. But there was until lately one who lay outside the pale of that dignity, one who shared the squalor and filth, but not the importance, of Chinese. He was called Old Bugs, and was the most disreputable object in the disreputable environment. What he had once been, many tried to guess, for his language and mode of utterance, when intoxicated to a certain degree, were such an excite wonderment, but that he was, present less difficulty for Old Bugs, and surfeit degree, eptimone, the pathetic species known as the bum, or the down and outer, whence he came, no one could leave, or tell. One night he had burst wildly into shenanigans, foaming at the mouth, and screaming for whiskey and hashish, and having been supplied in exchange for a promise to perform odd jobs, had hung about ever since, mopping floors, cleaning cupboards and glasses, and attending to 100 similar menial duties in exchange for the drink and drugs which were necessary to keep him alive and sane. He talked but little, and usually in the common jargon of the underworld, but occasionally, when inflamed by an unusually generous dose of crude whiskey, would burst forth into strings. Generous dose of the crude whiskey would get him to even do inconceivable policies of snatches to Snoner's prose and verse, which led certain habitats to conjure that he had seen better days. One steady patron, a bank defaulter, under cover, came to converse with him quite regularly, and the tone of discourse ventured the option that he had been a writer or a professor in his day. But the only tangible clue to Old Bug's past was a faded photograph which he constantly carried about with him. The photograph is of a young woman with noble and beautiful features. This he would sometimes draw from his tattered pocket, carefully unwrapped from its coverings of tissue paper, and gaze upon it for hours with an expression of inevitable sadness, tenderness, and love. It was not the portrait of one who had an underworld than eyes would be likely to know, but of a lady of breeding and quality, garbed in the quaint attire of 30 years before. Old Bugs himself seemed almost to belong to the past, for his nondescript clothing bore every hallmark of antiquity. He was a man of immense height, probably more than 6 feet, though his stooping shoulders sometimes belied the fact. His hair, a dirty white and falling out in patches, was never combed, and over his lean face grew a mangy stubble of coarse beard which seemed always to remain at the bristling stage, never shaven, yet never long enough to form a respectable set of whiskers. His features had perhaps been noble once, but were now seamed with ghastly effects of terrible disposition. At one time, probably the middle life, he had inevitably been grossly fat, and now he was horribly lean. The purple flush hanging in those loose pouches under his bleary eyes and upon his cheeks, altogether, Old Bugs was not pleasing to look upon. The disposition of Old Bugs was as odd as his aspect. For a nickel or a dose of whiskey or hashish, but as rare intervals he shirked the traits which earned him the name. Then he would try to straighten up, and a certain fire would creep into his sunken eyes. His demeanor would assume an unwonted grace and even dignity, and the sodden creatures around him would sense something of superiority, something which made them less ready to give the usual kicks and cuffs to the poor butt and drudge. At these times he would shew a sardonic humor and make remarks with the folk of Sheaton, and damned foolish or irrational, but the spell would soon pass, and once more old Bugs would resume his eternal floor scrubbing and cusped cupboard cleaning. But for one thing, old Bugs would have been an ideal slave for the establishment, and that one thing was his conduct. When young men were introduced for their first drink, the old man would then rise from the floor in anger and excitement, muttering threats of warning, and seeking to dissuade the novices in embarking upon the course of seeing life as it is. He would sputter and fume, exploding into sesquipedalian emotions and strength oaths, and admitted by a frightful airiness and earnestness which brought a shudder to more than one drunk ragged mind in the crowded room. But after a time his alcohol-enfeebled brain would wander from the subject, and with a foolish grin he would turn once more to his mop or cleaning rag. I do not think that many of Sheenan's regular patrons will ever forget the day the young Alfred Trevor came in. He was rather a rich, high-spirited youth who would go to the limit in anything he undertook. At least that was the verdict of Pete Slotz, Sheenan's runner, who had come across the boy at Lawrence College in the small town of Appleton, Wisconsin. Trevor was the son of prominent Puritans in Appleton. His father, Carroll Trevor, was an attorney and citizen of distinction, while his mother had made an inevitable reputation as a poetess under her maiden name of Eleanor Wing. Alfred was himself a scholar and poet of distinction, though cursed with a certain child irresponsibility which made him an ideal prey for Sheenan's runners. He was blond, handsome, and spoiled, vivacious and eager to taste the several forms of disposition about which he had read and heard. At Lawrence he became prominent over the mock fraternity of Tippetapakeg, where he was in it in the wildest and merriest of the wild and merry young roysters. But his immature colleague previously did not satisfy him. He knew deeper vices through books, and he now longed to know them as first-hand. Perhaps a tendency towards wildness has been stimulated somewhat by the repression to which he had been subjected at home, for Miss Trevor had particular reason for treating her only child with rigid severity. She had, in her own youth, been deeply and permanently impressed with the honor and disposition by the case to whom one which she had for a time engaged. Young Galf, the finance in question, had been one of Appleton's most remarkable sons, attaining distinction as a boy through his wonderful mentality. He won vast fame at the University of Wisconsin, and at the age of 23 returned to Appleton to take up professorship at Lawrence, and to slip a diamond upon the finger of Appleton's fairest and most brilliant daughter. For a season all went happily, till without warning the storm burst. Evil habits, dating from a first drink, taken years before in woodland seclusion, made themselves manifest to the young professor, and only by a hurried registration did he escape a nasty prosecution for injury to the habits and morals of the pupils under his charge. His engagement broken, Galpin moved east to begin his life anew. But before long, Appletons heard of his dismal and disgrace from New York University, when he had obtained an introductionship to England. Now Galpin devoted his time to the library and lecture platforms, preparing volumes and speeches of various subjects connected with Bell's literature, and always shewing a genius so remarkable that it seems that the public must sometimes pardon him for his past mistakes. His impressionable lectures in defense of Willem Poe, Verlaine, and Oscar Wilde were applied to himself as well. In the short Indian summer of his glory, there were talk of a renewed engagement at a certain cultural home of Park Avenue, but then blow fell. A final disgrace, compared to which the others had been as nothing, shattered the illusion of those who had come to believe in Galpin's reform. The young man abandoned his name and disappeared from public view. Rumor now had that he had been associated with a certain Constable Hastings, whose work from the stage of motion picture companies attracted a certain degree of attention because of its scholarly beneath and depth, but Hastings soon disappeared from the public eye, and Galpin became only a name for parents to quote in warning accents. Eleanor Wing soon celebrated her marriage to Carl Trevor, a rising young lawyer, and of her former admirer retained only enough
memory to dictate the name of her only son, and the moral guidance of that handsome and headstrong youth. Now, in spite of all the guidance, Alfred Trevor was at Sheenian's and about to take his first drink. "Boss!" cried Sluts, as he entered the vile-smelling room with his young victim. "Meet my friend, Alfred Trevor. Best ill-spoken sport up at Lillis. To this with the Appleton whist, you know. Some swell guy, too. Father's a big corporation Longerberg, and mother's some little genius. He wants to see if she could talk to you a little and know what the real lightning juice tastes like. So just remember, he's no friend, and treat him right." As the name Trevor Lawrence and Appleton fell on the air, the loafer seemed to sense something unusual. Perhaps it was only some sound connected with the clicking bells on balls of the pool tables and rattling glasses that were brought in the cryptic regions of the rear. Perhaps only then, plus some strange rustling of the dirty draperies in the dingy window. But many thought that someone in the room had gritted his teeth and drawn a very sharp breath. "Glad to know you, Shishin," said Trevor in a quiet, well-bred tone. "This is my first experience in a place like this, but I am a student of life and don't want to miss any experience. There's poetry in this sort of thing, you know, or perhaps you don't know, but it's all the same." "Young feller," responded the proprietor, "you come to this right place to see life. We got all kinds here. Real life and a good time. Damn government tried to tell you these folks are good to tell you what, but it can't stop a feller from hitting her up and getting you what feels good. What you want, feller? Booze, coke, or some other sort of dope? You couldn't ask for nothing we ain't got."
Habitats say. It was this point they noticed a cessation in the regular monster strokes of the mop. "I want whiskey. Good old-fashioned rye," exclaimed Trevor enthusiastically. "I'll tell you, I'm good and tired of water after reading of the merry bouts fellows used to have in the old days. I can't read an anecdote without watering at the mouth, and it's something a lot stronger than water that my mouth waters for."
"Amsterdam? What the hell is that?" Several hangers-on looked up as the young man went slightly beyond their depths. But the bank defaulter, under cover, explained to them that Arsenal was a gay old dog who lived many years ago and wrote about the fun he had when all the world was just like Sheehan's. "Let me see here, Trevor," continued the defaulter. "Didn't Schultz say your mother is a literary person, too?"
"Yes, damn it," replied Chester, "but nothing like that old Tien. She's one of those dull and tender moralizers that try to take all the joy out of life. Namely, palmly, sut poor. You hear her? She writes under her maiden name of Eleanor Wink."
"Well, here's your stuff," announced Sheenan jovially as a tray of old bottles and glasses were whirled to him. "Good old rye as far as your kingdom routers on this chin." The young oaf's eyes glistened, and his nostrils curled at the fumes of the brownish fluid which the attendant was pouring out for him. It repelled him horribly, and revolted into its inherent delicacies, but his determination to taste life to the full remained within him. Then he maintained a bold front, but before his resolution was put to the test, the unexpected intervened. Old Bugs, springing up from the crouching position in which he had been, leaped at the youth and dashed from him, hands on the uplifted glass, almost simultaneously attacking the tray of bottles and glasses with his mop and scattering the contents upon the floor in a confusion of odoriferous fluids and broken bottles and trumbles. Numbers of men or things, which had been men, dropped to the floor and began lapping at the puddles of spilled liquor, but most remained immovable, watching the unprecedented actions of the barroom drudge and derelict. Old Bugs straightened up before the astonished Trevor in a mild and cultivating voice. "Do not do this thing. I was like you once, and I did it, and now I am like this." "What do you mean, you damned old fool?" shouted Trevor. "What do you mean by interfering with a gentleman in his pleasures?" Sheehan, now recovering from his astonishment, advanced and laid a heavy hand on the old man's wife's shoulder. "This is the last time for you, you old bird," he exclaimed furiously. "When a gentleman will taste a drink here, but God he shall without your ear thither. Now get up till he drinks or I'll kick your hell out of here." But Sheenan had reckoned with scientific knowledge of abnormal psychology and the effects of nervous stimulants. Old Bugs, obtaining a firmer hold on the mop, began to wield it like a javelin. of the monoculous hop type, and soon cleared a considerable space around himself, meanwhile shouting various disconnected bits of quotation, among which he was predominantly repeated, "The sons of Baal, blown the unconscious in wine." The room became pandemonium, and the men screamed and howled in fright at the sinister being that they had aroused. Trevor seemed dazed in the confusion, and shrank to the wall as the strife thickened. "He shall not drink! He shall not drink!" thus roared old Bugs, as he seemed to run out of or rise above quotations. Policemen appeared at the door, attracted by the noise, but for a time they made no move to intervene. Trevor, now thoroughly terrified and cured forever of his desire to see life via the vice route, edged closer to the blue-coated newcomers. Could he but escape and catch a train for Appleton, he reflected, he would consider his education and dissipation quite complete. Then suddenly old Bugs ceased to wield his javelin and stopped still, drawing himself up and merely erected and in designed in the place of a king. Saluto, he shouted and dropped the whiskey-reeking floor, never to rise again. Subsequent impressions will never leave the mind of young Trevor. The picture is blurred, but ineradicable. Policemen plowed away through the crowd, questioning everyone closely, both about the incident and about the dead figure on the floor. Stephen especially did not reply with inquiries, yet without electing any information of the valuable concerning old Bugs. The bank defaulter, remembered the picture, and suggested that it be viewed and filed for identification purposes at the police headquarters. An officer bent reluctantly over the loathsome glassy-eyed form and found it in a tissue-wrapped cardboard, which he passed around the others. "Some chicken," leered a drunkard man as he viewed the beautiful face, but those who were sober did not leer, looking with respect and abasement at the delicate spiritual features. No one seemed able to place the subject, and all wondered that no one seemed to be able to recognize the drug-rich decoration of the portrait in possession. That is, all but the defaulter, who was meaning, while eyeing the indulgent bluecoats rather uneasily. He had seen a little deeper beneath old Bug's mask of utter degradation. Then the picture was passed to Trevor, and a change came over the youth. After the first start, he replaced the tissue wrapping around the portrait, as if to shield it from the sordidness of the place. Then he gazed long and searchingly at the figure on the floor, noting its great height and aristocratic features, which seemed to appear now that the wretched flame of life had flickered out. "No," he said hastily, as the question was put to him. He did not know the subject of the picture. It was so old, he added, that no one knew now could be expected to recognize it. But Alfred Trevor did not speak the truth. As many guessed, when he was offered to take charge of the body and secure its entertainments into Appleton, over the library mantel in his home hung the exact replica of the picture, and all his life he had known and loved its original, for the gentle, nimble features were that of his own mother. Such concludes the story of Old Bugs. This one deals with a more personal demon, the demon of alcoholism. We could tell as the readers in the middle of the story personally that Old Bugs was indeed the one that they were talking about that was cast out. He saw himself in young Trevor for more than one reason. I'm sure he could recognize those beautiful, delicate features, as the picture was his only prized possession. That was the son of his one true love, who was now a poet and living her life as the best as she could. But what could have been if Old Bugs did not take that first sip of debauchery? As you notice, he also speaks in eldritch tongues before he inevitably meets his fate. This is because many believe that alcoholism was a personal demon in the past, and even is referred to in the present. What were your thoughts of the story? Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me below. Overall, I think that the story was done well, and captures a more reasonable horror as the last few stories had. Something that we can experience just in our own inner demons and our own vices. Until next time though, my Lovecraftians. Bye-bye.